What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I'm coming to you today. Got a quick one, not a lot. I'm going to be talking about, do have some Dolphins related news. There's some pretty big news that came out today, so I am going to touch on that. But before I do, I want to quickly mention or touch on, kind of some personal stuff. Um, and I do want to, and it is, channel related and all that good stuff too. So, um, I am currently, as you guys know, there's been a lot going on in my life, and I've had a lot of things for the past several years now that I've really just been trying to figure out. And, this past year or so in particular, things have really kind of come to a head, and, it's been, desperation mode and stuff. But right now, I do have a job opportunity in front of me. Finally found something, finally got a response back from an application, all that good stuff. So I have been, working on that, and I'm going to be working on that a lot going forward. So, it is going to eat up a lot of my time. And as I've mentioned, in a recent video, I think, or maybe one of my live streams, I'm going to be doing this as like kind of a side thing. You know, the fact that I'll be able to do it though at all, hopefully, look, my situation is still not, solved, and there's still a lot of work left to be done. I'm just beginning this new job, or at the beginning stages of it. And, I haven't I haven't drawn any income from it yet, right? So, I'm still at the very beginning of it. Still have a lot of work to do. In fact, I had to get a license because it's an insurance sales job, actually, frankly, and it's something I've never done before. I've done sales jobs before, have some limited sales experience. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into it, but point is there's a lot. I had to get a license, so I had to do like this 52-hour course, which I got done. And, I have my licensing exam on Thursday, tomorrow, actually. So, a lot going on with that. But the point is I'm not going to be making a ton of content, especially now that the season is over and whatnot. Obviously, I'll do some stuff for the draft, and whatnot, and I'll make periodic videos here and there, especially when there is big news, regarding the Dolphins. So I just wanted to let you guys know about that first and foremost. Hopefully things will work out with this job, and I will be able to continue making content at least to some degree, and be able to continue to continue to grow my channel and all that good stuff. So, for me personally, even being in a situation where I'll be able to continue to make content at all is a win. But it is going to be limited content. I'm not going to be making a ton of it because I do have a lot of other things going on in my life, and I am trying to get this shit stabilized, and I finally do have a job opportunity. It is a commission-based job too, so there is that aspect of it. Like, there's a lot that goes into it, and I have to focus on it, and I have to, work hard and like I always do. And hopefully this time around, my hard work will actually bear fruit for once. So we'll see how it all goes. Wish me luck and all that good stuff. But with that, let's go ahead and jump into the actual news. Because it would seem as though the Dolphins have made a change in their coaching staff. And Adam Schefter, among many, many, many other people, including now, obviously, myself, are reporting that the Miami Dolphins and Vic Fangio have apparently agreed to part ways, which I do have some thoughts. Let me just kind of give you some of what has been said out there. According to Schefter, Dolphins and Vic Fangio have mutually agreed to part ways. Sources tell me and Jay Fowler at ESPN, Fangio now will be the top target for the Philadelphia Eagles to hire as their defensive coordinator, and a deal is expected. Miami is allowing Fangio to leave to be closer to his family in Pennsylvania. Fangio and the Eagles had an interest in working together in 2023. Obviously, he was with us this past year, but the timing didn't work out. This time it will. So it looks like he's expected to head over there Joe Shad puts out, I always appreciate how candid Vic Fangio was in press conferences. I do wonder if he could have blitzed a few more times or given Cam Smith, Channing Tindall, or Emmanuel Ogba a few more reps. But Fangio knew what he wanted. Admittedly old school, probably a bit stubborn. I actually read it for that last bit. And I actually heard too, there are people out there, on Twitter and so on and so forth saying that the players are happy. I mean, look, I don't know about that, and frankly, I don't really care about that. I mean, obviously now it's going to be interesting to see who they bring in. There's some comments and thoughts out there that maybe Anthony Campanile could end up getting promoted from linebackers coach up to DC, and that could be a natural progression for him and his career and so on and so forth. Obviously, it looks like Fangio's going to go over to the Eagles, presumably. So that'll be interesting. But for us, obviously, who's going to be the new guy? That's going to be something. Look, couple thoughts. Okay, so first and foremost, at the beginning of the season, and when things didn't start out as great as we had hoped defensively, I always knew that was going to be the case, right? Like, if anybody who knows football on any even basic level, because look, at the end of the day, I've never been a player, a coach, a scout, none of that stuff. So I admittedly don't really know, like, the X's and O's, like any of those people, like a player, a scout, or a coach would, right? Like, I don't have that kind of experience. I've never had to learn a playbook. But I'm smart enough, and I've watched football enough, and I've watched enough content creators and so on, and commentators and analysts and so on who do know that I have a decent grasp of how football goes. And for anybody who understands that Vic Fangio's defense was always going to take a minute to implement. It was the first year, right? A bunch of guys, new guys. Ramsey was out for a while, right? There was all these factors, and we always knew it was going to take a little while, and it did. But then it settled out, and if you also know, Vic Fangio always leads a top 10 defense. His defenses are always top 10. He always manages. Now, look, is it true that he's old school? Absolutely. Is it true that maybe he's a little stubborn? Yeah, very possibly, right? But at the same time, it basically, it worked almost to perfection. Like, it wasn't perfect, and nothing is ever going to be perfect, so let's be clear about that. But again, I mean, were there maybe times where he should have blitzed more? Maybe he should have allowed some of these younger players to get in there? Sure, maybe he should have followed or shadowed some of the top receivers with Jalen Ramsey a little more frequently. Okay, get it. Got it. I understood. But again, at the end of the day, in totality, he's always going to have a top 10 defense. That's what it ended up being. It was still just year one with a bunch of guys that, hadn't played together under him and so on and so forth, had to implement the scheme. I think it was fine. And honestly, if I'm being real, it is a little surprising just from the standpoint of, it was just year one, and they gave him a massive contract. Now, that doesn't really matter. I mean, whatever. I think, Stephen Ross is probably still going to be on the line to pay him for a few years because of that contract. But it doesn't really matter. They can obviously, void the contract or cancel or end the contract, and he can move on. Things, maybe he's still owed money, but he can still move on. Whatever. It doesn't even matter. Right? At the end of the day, what matters is what's going to happen with the Dolphins. Now, I was hoping he was going to stay for another year because I wanted to see continuity. I wanted to see what this defense would be able to do in year two, especially after they get another year of, draft under their belt and they get some of their guys. So, look, and I'll actually even apply this to this whole conversation about Tua and McDaniel. And I've said this before. If anybody thinks either of those guys should leave, could leave, would leave, or are gonna leave, you're not only wrong, you're absolutely crazy. There's no reason why either of those two guys should leave. And I said this on Twitter about Tua, and I'll say this about McDaniel too. until a better option presents itself. I'm talking a little bit more specifically about Tua here, but until a better option presents itself, Tua should be the unquestioned starter of this team. Hold on. Let me rephrase that a little bit because I said it how I wanted to say it on Twitter, and this is how I want to say it. My phrasing, I like to be very specific in my phrasing because phrasing is huge when it comes to what you intend to communicate, right? The message. So until a better option presents itself in a safe and efficient manner, Tua should be the unquestioned starter of this team. Same thing goes for McDaniel. Now, when I say the situations are a little bit different between a head coach and a quarterback, but what I mean by safe and efficient as far as Tua goes is, if you guys know my philosophy for drafting quarterbacks, I would never take one in rounds 1 or 2 ever, period, point blank, bottom line. And I would use those earlier drafts for offensive, defensive linemen or wide receivers or safeties or, either trenches or skill positions. Okay. But I would take a quarterback every single year, no questions asked, in rounds 3 or later, depending on just how bad you need a quarterback. The reason for that is because it's a crapshoot, the draft. Way more number 1 picks or first round quarterbacks end up being busts or just average than they end up being the superstars of the league. It's not even close. It's not even close. The amount of draft picks that have been spent on first round picks that didn't work out is astronomical, especially in comparison to the ones that did. Also, when you take guys like Tom Brady and all these guys that were taken in the later rounds that ended up being really good, and in Brady's case, one of the best, it just proves that you don't have to. You don't have to waste a first round pick on a quarterback when the odds are it's not going to be right anyway. And when I say odds are, it's like 95% or some crazy shit like that. It's got to be at least over 80% of the first round picks that don't end up being franchise guys. It's got to be at least 80%, and I still think that's probably conservative. So when that's the case, I'd never take one in rounds 1 or 2, but I would always take one in 3 or later, depending on how much you need a quarterback. In this case, I wouldn't take one very high. I would take one in maybe round 6 or 7, or even be happy as an undrafted free agent and don't use a draft pick at all. But I would always bring one in. Now, not only do you eliminate some of the wasted risk of taking a first-round quarterback and also give yourself the opportunity to hit on a guy in mid to later rounds, but then because of the way you're doing it, you're not having to feel so stressed or worried about chasing quarterbacks. You know you're always going to take one every year in the mid to late rounds or as an undrafted guy. You can bring them in. You always have an influx of new talent every single year into that quarterback room. Then that allows you to draft and develop guys. Low risk, but potentially very, very high reward. You let that cream rise to the cream rise to the top in training camp and all that good stuff. That will then allow you to always make sure you have the best starter and backup in place. Then as you draft and develop guys, especially if you get good at drafting and developing quarterbacks, you can have players that you use as trade trips to get even more draft capital from other teams who need quarterbacks. And again, until a better option in a safer and more efficient manner, presents itself, which I think, to me, that's the way I would do it, Tua should be the unquestioned guy. Now, let's say we brought in an undrafted free agent and he just blows the doors off of everybody in training camp and preseason and earns his way. Now, I seriously doubt that, because he would be a rookie and, McDaniel and Tua already have, chemistry and all that stuff. But let's just say it happened, right? And then he ends up being better than Tua. Fine, by all means. Then you could trade Tua if you wanted to, right? And like I said, I doubt that would happen. But if it did happen, then so fucking be it. But that's my point, though. That's the way to do it, in my opinion. Anyway, I digress. So my point, though, is that, I think that, there's a couple points. There's obviously the point about Tua and about McDaniel, but back to the team and Vic Fangio and this whole situation, I was really looking forward to him having a second year, seeing what this defense could do, him getting some more of his guys in. But I mean, there are a lot of factors. I guess, he wants to go back to Philly and, maybe the locker room, some of them were, whatever. Whatever. I don't care about that. I mean, it's potentially all a factor. It was mutual, it was all civil and amicable, and it's going to be what's best for him. So by all means, all I care about is what happens with the Dolphins. And I would have preferred to have that continuity and so on and so forth. Because now what we have to deal with is, first of all, we have to figure out who it's going to be. Then it's going to be a new guy running the show. Then, they're going to potentially be implementing a new system. It's going to be year one. At least with Vic Fangio, we knew that eventually his defense was going to be a top 10. We don't know that with this new guy. We don't even know who the new guy is going to be. Is he going to be able to lead? Is he going to be a leader of men? Can he get that side of the ball, together and play well? What kind of guys does he want to draft? There's a lot that goes into it that we don't know now that this seat is vacant and we have to fill it, right? At least with Fangio, there's a lot you do know. He's going to give us another top 10 defense next year. Or at least he would have. And now he's going to give that to most likely the Eagles, right? So there's a lot of things for whatever frustrations you may have had with Vic Fangio, I'd say that there is a very high probability that it would have been in our best interest to have him around for another year. And there's a very high probability that whatever it is that he may have provided us could be better than what the next guy could provide us. Now, maybe the next guy does a fantastic job and we still have a top 10 defense. But here's the thing. If we go into 2024 season, and let's just say hypothetically that the Eagles do get Vic Fangio and the Eagles end up having a top 10 defense, by the way, their defense was not good this year. Let's keep that in mind too. So if Vic Fangio goes to the Eagles, turns that defense around, brings them up to being a top 10 defense, which he most likely will if he goes there because that's what he does everywhere. But then let's say the Dolphins elevate Anthony Campanile or bring in somebody else, and then let's say even if they're a top 15 defense but not a top 10, that's still regression. But let's say the Dolphins defense regresses. Well, then what I just said a minute ago would be proven correct if that happens. And there is definitely a chance that could happen. Absolutely, there's a chance that could happen. Right? So, because then you would be able to say, well, Vic Fangio gave us a top 10 defense this year. The Eagles defense was trash. So then if next year the defense for the Eagles ends up being a top 10 and even if the Dolphins defense isn't bad, but they regress, well, that's proof. That's evidence that Vic Fangio would have at least given us better than what the new guy did. Now, that's not a guarantee. Hopefully that's not the case. Again, hopefully the new guy does great, but we just don't know yet. Because we don't even know who it's going to be. And let's say it's Anthony Campanile. I love him. But I don't know if he's going to do even as good as Vic Fangio did. And frankly, there's no reason to actually, maybe you could hope that he will, but there's no tangible reason to think so. Because he hasn't been in the league near as long. He doesn't have the same kind of track record and resume. Right? He's never been a defensive coordinator before, Anthony Campanile, right? So you just don't know. And odds are he's not going to be as good as the old head who's been doing it for 50 years. You know what I'm saying? So even though the old head may be stubborn and may, not be as adaptable and all that good stuff. Anyway, you guys get the point. I guess at the end of the day, I'm not super surprised, but I am a little surprised. I'm not mad at it. I don't hate it or dislike it, but I'm also not thrilled about it. I'm kind of on the fence right now. I'm kind of just indifferent at the moment. And I guess right now for me, it's just going to be a wait and see sort of thing. Wait and see who they hire. Wait and see what he does. Because frankly, at the end of the day, We're not, when it comes to this defensive coordinator situation, for whatever opinions we might have about it right now, we're not going to know anything until after the 2024 season. The reason for that is because we're going to have to find out who gets hired, and then we're going to actually have to visually see for ourselves on paper what happens. And here's what I will say. If a scenario like what I just gave as an example plays out, none of us are going to be happy with it, right? If Fangio goes to the Eagles, turns their defense around, takes them from being bad this year and makes them good in a top 10 defense next year, and then because that would make then the Eagles, with their offense and Jalen Hurts and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I mean, they'll be a Super Bowl favorite at the beginning of the fucking season if Vic Fangio comes in, because everybody's going to expect that he's going to turn that defense around, and there's no reason to believe that he won't. Even if it takes a minute, even if it takes halfway through the season, you would expect at the end of the year, they'll be a top 10 unit. And that's a reasonable expectation because he's done it year in and year out for like 50 fucking years. And there's no reason to think that that would change. Things, in the NFL, when it comes to schemes like that, don't change that fast or whatever. And he knows how to adapt at least enough to be able to keep himself relevant and so on and so forth. Anyway, and he knows how to work with the guys that he has. So that's to be expected. But then if the Dolphins defense regresses at all and is not a top 10 unit, well, we're going to be upset by that. And it could hurt our, opportunities this upcoming season, to make a run. And I know a lot of Dolphins fans were super hyper focused on this season, and it's part of the reason why a lot of Dolphins or some Dolphins fans are like, trade Tua and get rid of McDaniel and all this stuff, is because the expectations were up so high, and people seem to think that this year was the only year that we're going to be able to potentially make a deep push and go for the Super Bowl because of the level of talent and so on and so forth that we have, and because of next year's cap situation, et cetera, et cetera. I get that. I understand that. And especially with the history that we have as Dolphins fans over the past 20 or so years. Here's what I will say about that. And this is tied into some of the stuff I said about McDaniel and Tua and so on earlier. They are the best combination we've had over that 2.5 decade span or whatever since Marino and Shula. Not only is Tua the best quarterback since Marino, and not only is McDaniel the best coach since Shula, but they are also the best combination of head coach and quarterback that we've had since those two. They're the best individually, and they're the best as a pair. And I think that back-to-back winning seasons, going from 9 wins to 11 wins, both in the postseason, yes, I get we lost the division and exited out of the first round. You know my feelings about that if you watch my channel. I actually think that the season as a whole for the Miami Dolphins came down to injuries, but also the NFL officiating. I think the NFL officiating decided the last KC game, the Buffalo game at the end of the season for the division, and the Eagles game for sure when we played them earlier on. Anyway, because it's just a fucking clown show at this point. But I don't want to talk about that. So, but yeah, so McDaniel and Tua are the best that we've had. And they've done amazing things in their first 2 years. If what I believe to be is correct, then we are good, and keeping them in place will be the right decision, because over the next few years, they will prove that this year and let's say next year are not the window. The window is now and in the future. But it's more than that. It's not just saying that sometime in the future we'll win a championship. To me, what it's saying, and what McDaniel has brought in here and built as a culture and instilled, and with what he's done with Tua and what they've done together, et cetera, is they are building something long-term, something that's going to be consistent. It's going to be sustainable. They've shown that they have the ability to grow, to improve, to get better year in and year out. And I think that if we give them the time, I think if we give them the opportunity. Now, again, this upcoming year, I really wish we would have kept Vic Fangio and we would have been able to take this entire team and go into next year. We know Fangio's going to give us a top 10 defense. We know McDaniel's going to give us a top 10 offense. They just need to improve the offensive line. They need to get another year under their belt of drafts. It's going to be year 3 of McDaniel, year 2 of Fangio. Now we're going to have a little bit of unsettledness on the defensive side of the ball. There are going to be questions. There's going to be a lack of continuity, and so on and so forth. There's going to have to be an establishment stage, a period where they, build chemistry and all that stuff. We're going to have to give the new guys some time, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, from good teams, good coaches do tend to get plucked. So this sort of thing does tend to happen. But anyway, I digress again. Point is, at the end of the day, I would have preferred if Fangio would have been here at least for one more year, but that's not the case. So it is what it is. I still believe that Stephen Ross finally got a football decision correct. Because if you guys know, my biggest complaints over the past several years with this team and this organization always stemmed from Stephen Ross, even though I admitted and understood that getting rid of the owner is not something that's feasible or going to happen. It still didn't change the fact that that's where the problem started. Now, if you guys know me, I always gave him credit for his work in the community and community service and stuff like that. I've always given him credit for his willingness to build the stadium and the training facility and use his own money, and thinks that the owners as billionaires should be the ones to do that, because he's absolutely right. And I've also given him credit for being willing to open up the checkbook for players. The one thing I've always criticized him for, and it's always been the most important thing, was his football decisions. Primarily when hiring the guys in the building to run the shit. He's been awful at that. Absolutely atrocious. I believe he finally has it right with Mike McDaniel. We need to give them time. We need to let them do their thing. Let them figure out who's going to be the defensive coordinator and see how all that plays out over the next year, because obviously that will be a factor in this whole grand scheme of things. Let's see how he's going to have to deal with this adversity now, because let's be real, it is a level of adversity. He's going to have to find a new guy, and they're still going to have to perform well next year. We're still going to have stars on that side of the field, but, we'll see. We'll see how it plays out, right? Obviously, there's also cap situation, contracts. Is Howard going to be here? Is Wilkins going to be here? Blah-bity, 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 blah-bity. All these players are going to need to get paid. They're going to need to be restructurings, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we have the right people in place. And I think we need to see how it plays out over the next few years. Now, if we end up going downhill and then end up sucking the next few years, okay. But I don't think that's going to happen. And I think what we're going to see is I think we're going to see continued progress from this team. And I said this online too the other day, and this is how I'll, kind of wrap this show. I think that going forward, the Dolphins are going to be in a better overall place than the rest of the AFC East teams. And that includes the Buffalo Bills, who, by the way, just lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in Buffalo, so that's amazing. But the Buffalo Bills and the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, et cetera, whatever, the Patriots, they're going to be a while before they get back to relevance, right? I think the Dolphins are actually going to be in a better overall place over the next few years and for the foreseeable future than the rest of the AFC East. So to me, I think we're going to have 10 plus, 11 plus, let's say 11 plus wins next year. This is early, but I think we'll match our win total at least next year. And I think instead of losing the division, we'll win that shit. Although, again, I think the division was actually robbed from us because the NFL referees are just absolute clowns, but also so is the playbook and the NFL as a whole. But again, I digress. I think we'll make progress again next year. I think we'll see, I think they'll address the offensive line in the draft in this offseason to reinforce that. I think besides that, at the skill positions, they're pretty good. I think that they will figure things out cap-wise and figure out ways to bring a lot of these guys back. on both sides of the ball. I think that they will have improvements in year 3. I think we'll see improvements from Mike McDaniel as a head coach. It's only his second year, right? And he's shown us so many amazing things in the first 2 years. It just blows my mind that even one Dolphins fan on this planet could want him gone. Just blows my mind. Anyway, because it's a completely different situation. Like, some people will be like, well, you didn't like Flores right from the start. Yeah, but that dude showed some fucking major red flags even before he left the Patriots. Just coming from the Patriots' toxic organization under Bill Belichick was a red flag in and of itself. But even with that, I was willing to give him a chance until he stepped up to the fucking podium for the very first time and showed right off the bat that he's just fucking garbage with his, answers and phrasing and the way he, carried himself and just et cetera, et cetera. And then, the lies and the way he sabotaged Tua and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, and by the way, he was tanking. It's unquestionable. He was part of it. He knew about it. There's no way Stephen Ross would have hired him if he wasn't down for it. So if he claims some bullshit about, I didn't want to tank. No. I could go into all kinds of things. Personnel decisions. He even said that he had final say on the roster. Game time decisions. Fucking the way he used players. There are so many. He was tanking. Period. Bottom line, point blank, period. I don't want to hear anything about it, right? And he was a scumbag. I told people, my point is, it's a difference. Because Mike McDaniel hasn't shown any, red flags. Has he shown flaws? Absolutely. And does he need to work on that? Yes. But there's a difference between flaws and red flags. You feel me? Anyway, so I think we're good to go. I think we're in good hands. I am a little concerned now about this defensive coordinator position, and we'll see how all that plays out. And hopefully it doesn't play out like that one, potentially not so good situation. I mean, honestly, for me personally, though, I'll keep it real. Even if they were at least a top 15 defense with the coordinator change and everything, I'd still be fine with that. Even if it, technically means some regression. But I think we'll be fine, if we can at least have a top 15 defense and a top 10 or so, offense as well. But anyway, I'm going to get up out of here. Hope you guys do appreciate it. Wish me luck and everything in my job and all that good stuff, because I would like to finally be able to get a grasp on my fucking life and then be able to continue to do this even if it is in a limited capacity. So if you do like all this stuff, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, share my channel and videos with your friends and family, leave questions or comments, concerns, whatever down in the comments section. As long as you're respectful and it's cordial and all that stuff, I can deal with shit talking and things said in jest and playing around. But if you come in here being disrespectful, you can fuck right off. Other than that, leave your comments and questions, concerns, all that good stuff. And I love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Fins up all day, every day. Let's go, baby. 2024, the 2024-2025 season is ours. Super Bowl, baby. Nah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm not like that. I thought we had a damn good chance this year, but, it is what it is. We'll see how next year goes. All right, guys, I'm out. Peace.
Tannehill will throw it. This will end it after the shovel will run. Brown circling, pulling down. Gronkowski, did that baby go? Touchdown! Tannehill, a miracle in the miraculous of Miami. Stills to Parker to Drake. Enemy help off the field. Unimaginable what has taken place here in South Florida. The Dolphins have done it. They keep their season alive. 69 yards. Pure joy. Miami wins it.